Idol's latest album, Ultra Mono, is a record which I think can only be fully understood in the context of the band's detractors, so that's where we're going to start. This is a record primed for hipsters in craft beer bars and award show attendees to misunderstand as some great genius work that rallies against all that is wrong in society, but don't you dare let them take a look at themselves and realise that their white, middle-class comfort might just be contributing to the seemingly exponential daily societal divisions. That wouldn't be a nice thing to do, would it? This, whether they like it or not, is the audience idols are helping to cultivate, the entitled, smug, sanctimonious, performatively woke people who tweet out their political manifesto but then lack the gumption to act on it. So reading these criticisms, both of the album Ultra Mono and recently of idols themselves, it left me going into Ultra Mono with a fundamental question. Are idols simply just posers who claim to challenge the status quo in a meaningful way, but instead end up with nonsensical jingoistic slogans? Or are they a vital British punk band who cut through the noise with blunt yet brilliant messages? For me, it's certainly the latter, and I think those who believe the former are slightly missing the point of idols. So, here's my take on Ultra Mono. But before we dive back into our main question, let's just back up a second for some of you who might not be that familiar with Idols. Let's get a little bit acquainted with the band first. So Idols are a Bristol-based, I'd call them a punk band, they might not, but sod it, they're a punk band for all intents and purposes, who formed in 2009 and rose to prominence, I would say, in 2018 with their second album, Joy as an Act of Resistance, a sensitive, politically adept and musically explosive record, which challenged a wide array of societal problems facing Britain at the time and still now, such as anti-immigrant sentiment with the roaring Danny Nedelko, male suicide with Samaritans, or toxic masculinity with Never Fight a Man with a Pen, as well as a whole other host of socio-political themes and issues. So now that we've introduced the band a bit, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this, and into the role of politics in Idol's music. For me, a great starting point is to let's think of some of the great political anthems that music has had, such as Bob Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changin', U2's Sunday Bloody Sunday, or even John Lennon's Imagine. These are not songs which brought about political change, certainly not. Bono didn't end the Irish Troubles, Dylan didn't actually change the times, and John Lennon certainly didn't achieve a world without religion. But at the end of the day, does that really matter? Music alone doesn't have the power to change the world, but what it can do, and what it can do brilliantly, is hold up a mirror to the injustices of the world, to inequality, to racism, to sexism. It can show billionaires to be blood-sucking leeches on society, and show right-wing politicians to be vapid vampires. And through this, it can help give power and strength to the people in the movements that it speaks about, the people who are rallying actively against these things. Political music doesn't need to change the world, but it can help inspire it. And consequently, since political music is not a prime mover of change, then it doesn't need to take the lyrical form of a political manifesto or a philosophical treatise. It just needs to make a statement, to form a rallying cry for those who dream of a better society. And this, I argue, is what idols are brilliant at, and what they succeed in doing on Ultra Mono. So when we're understanding Idols as a political band in light of their critics, we've got to look at some of the songs on Ultra Mono that some critics have an issue with. There's some who say that Ne touche pas moi is too obvious. Its lyrics, this is your body and it belongs to nobody but you, and the blatant screams of consent after the chorus, some find those too obvious. It's so on the nose, it's so #MeToo. But for me, it's fantastic. It's musically got a rollicking 70s punk energy, and it makes you want to go out and punch every dickhead who you see try and sexually harass a woman at a gig or any space. And having seen this happen enough times in person, it's an anthemic boost of encouragement to fight these things when you see them. And while some might find Model Village to simply disparage and belittle people who live in the English countryside, caricaturing and distorting real people's political views with inflammatory, jingoistic leftism, the shock, the horror, in reality, it's biting satire, using the idea of a model village as a metaphor for the small-minded, petty nationalism and patriotism which seemingly infects this nation. It's great to hear a band so convincingly just take the piss out of the country, and I love the chorus. To hear Joe scream, "I beg your pardon, I don't care about your rose garden, I'm listening to the things you said, and you just sound like you're scared to death." And we all know there's places in Britain that fit this bill, places with overwhelming amounts of white people, with people more concerned about their rose gardens than the effects that austerity has had across the country. And combine this with jarring dual riffage from their guitarists as they play off one another with staccato picked chords contrasted against the mighty drum performers whilst Joe sings "Just saluting flags 'cause it's British." It makes for a brilliant, captivating punk tune with a real bite and a musical depth to it. And look, I don't just want to talk about Idol's lyrics all day long, because you heard me correctly. For me, this album does have a musical depth, which isn't something you would say about that many punk albums. So let's stop talking about the politics in the lyrics for a bit, and let's go to the music. Something that I think most people would find it hard to disagree on. That musically, this is certainly one of the band's best albums. It's got a wide range of sounds. I mean, sure, most of the songs feature loud guitars, but with a rhythmic brilliance that ties it together in a way that's so different to so many other bands out there. Take the musically terrifying opener of War with Joe screaming clack 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 clang clang. That's the sound of a gun going bang bang. His onomatopoeia adding to the furious intensity of the guitars, which almost sound like air raid sirens. Turning up loud, and it's damn terrifying, especially when Joe just starts to randomly scream. And John Beavis on the drums, I mean, his performance cannot be understated on this album. He may as well be playing the drums with 2 tree trunks, and I'm not sure it's physically possible to hit the drums any louder than he manages to here. But then, this album isn't just all hollering and noisy guitars. There's a hymn as well towards the end of the album. And not a hymn as in, "Oh come all ye faithful," but more of a shimmering, emotional post-punk hymn. It's a moment of personal clarity from Joe, with humour like "Teletext has a place in my heart," I mean, doesn't it to everyone's? Mixed with the sincerity of "I want to be loved, everybody does." It's got a delicate, contemplative tranquility about it, with the production feeling wide open, almost shoegazy in nature. It's somewhere between My Bloody Valentine, Joy Division and The Cult, and for me that just works beautifully. Still, the best moments on this album are where Idols sound like a live band in the studio with a relentless determination and unified sound. Take Mr. Motivator, which sees the band create a wall of punkish DIY sound, as well as throwing in a catchy chorus. And whilst on this album you're not going to get the big anthemic hits like Danny Nadelko, there's still a good amount of melody to be found here, and Mr. Motivator is a great example of that. Or we can take Grounds with its skittering hip-hop influence in the rhythm and programming. It's a song which spits and stutters before bursting at the seams and then receding. And for me, it is the rhythmic differences which make each song sound different to the last, and each one, for me at least, has a fairly distinct sound and vibe to it, with only a couple of small missteps across the record, such as Kill 'Em With Kindness and The Lover, which each of them for me symbolises a slightly different issue with Ultra Mono, because despite all of my praise, it's not a perfect album and it does have a few flaws. I do feel that Joe Talbot might be letting the criticism get to him a little bit too much, and while it might feel good to exercise it all on the record, get it out, I think he can get a little bit too caught up in his own head about it, which makes for a less compelling listening experience. The Lover has the lyrics, "You say you don't like my cliches, our sloganeering and our catchphrase, I say love is like a freeway." And cliches are also referenced in Mr. Motivator's lyrics as well, with "How do you like them cliches?" A casual joke or two might have worked, but a song like The Lover is so singular in its focus against the haters that it makes a band who often has observational wit and personal empathy just scream, "I want to cater for the haters, eat shit." Whereas Kill 'Em With Kindness, on the other hand, just lyrically doesn't really seem to commit to anything specific, and perhaps does devolve almost into the kind of generalized cliches that some of their critics accuse the band of. But after the piano intro fake out, for me overall it just feels like Idles going through the motions musically without the rhythmic depth and the pseudo hip-hop kind of feel, which makes the rest of the album so compelling of a listen. At the end of the day, Ultra Mono ain't as good as Joy Is an Act of Resistance. That album stands out for me as a modern punk masterpiece. But Ultrafar ain't that far off either. It's a rip-roaring, positive-laden, yet still angry political punk album, which I, for once, certainly felt like I needed in 2020. And while I know a lot of people might not like this review, saying that politics shouldn't be shoved into a music review, but this is the effect of the mighty Idles, and this is for me where politically they succeed. They might not overthrow the government, but they do inspire you to take a stand, to stop tolerating the bullshit of our modern political discourse, and just try not to let hate win. Though maybe I'd kill our shared enemies with something a little stronger than kindness, but it's a start. Thanks so much for watching. This has been the Album Man. Comment, rate, subscribe. Find some of my videos on the end card in a couple of seconds. But until next time, as always, long live rock and roll.